In this video, we're going to talk about auctions. Auction is a game theoretical application in mechanism design. It's a game among strategic players. Usually, it involves one seller and several buyers. And the goal of the seller is typically to maximize his revenue or some other social valuations. And to achieve his goal, the seller needs to select the auction format. And the goal of a bidder is to win the item and end up with some positive surplus. So the strategy of a bidder is to bid. And when we talk about auctions, typically this is what you picture in mind. A group of audience who are interested in a famous painting will participate in an auction. And there's an auctioneer, usually with a hammer in hand. He will announce prices that go higher and higher each round, and the bidders will leave if they think the price is too high. And this process continues until there's only one buyer who still shows interest, and the auctioneer will announce going once, going twice, and then sold. But actually, auction is a much broader topic than what we have in mind of this specific format. It's been used in many aspects in our everyday life. For example, a spectrum auction. So what is a spectrum? Spectrum is a huge range of various frequencies used for all sorts of different things, like X-rays, microwaves, TV broadcasts, and mobile phones. Everything wireless uses spectrum. And the government needs to allocate different frequencies for different users so that the signals don't interfere with each other. And the allocation of spectrum is done by auction. Usually it involves huge amount of money, millions or even billions of dollars. For example, as we move from 4G to 5G network, we need to decide, the government needs to decide, the carriers, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and so on, who gets what frequency, covers what area. Like AT&T will get 600 megahertz frequency covering the New York area, and T-Mobile will get 700 megahertz covering the West Coast, and so on. And they need to pay the corresponding prices for this license. And because it involves a huge commercial and social valuation in this auction, a clever design will save us a lot of money and energy. So it is very important and necessary to learn how to design this auction, and as bidders, how to bid strategically. Another example of auction is stock market. It may not be very obvious at first glance, but when you think of it, it is actually a two-sided auction. Suppose that you want to buy some shares of Amazon, let's say, on the stock market. So on the interface you indicate you want to buy, then you need to enter the number of shares you're interested in, let's say 100 shares, then at what price you're willing to pay. So you submit your price, then you hit the button Review Order. And at the same time, you're actually submitting a bid. For the 100 shares of stock, you want to bid such a price. In the meanwhile, some sellers will do a very similar thing. They'll indicate they want to sell some shares of Amazon and at what price they are willing to accept. Then the stock market will do the matching. It will select from all the buyers the highest willingness to pay and match to the seller who is willing to accept the lowest price. So the stock market is actually a combination of auction and the reverse auction happening at the same time. Here we list several other applications of auctions like government contract, housing, cars, and antiques, and so on. Here we emphasize that auctions eliminate the use of market makers, induce competition, and usually award objects to the bidder who values it the most. This is a very important property because it's usually defined as efficient allocation. As economists, we want to allocate the scarce resource to the one who values it the most, so as to ensure the allocation is efficient. And another reason to use auction is that sellers usually don't know how much the buyers would value this object. So in the process of an auction, they will sometimes reveal this information. Here is some history of auctions. If you're interested in, you can read. And winner's curse. We will analyze it later on, but let me explain to you the meaning of this fancy word. Winner's curse happens when you win the item. As soon as you get this item, you know immediately that you overpaid. And the reason is very intuitive. As soon as you win this item, you know that everyone else values it less than you. So you could have lowered your bid a little bit, but still win this item. However, you can pay less. So the moment you win this item, you know that you pay too much. This is the so-called winner's curse. Starting from here, we begin to define some terminologies. What is a valuation? Valuation is the maximum willingness to pay for an item. For example, the value is $100. If the bidder is indifferent with paying $100 and obtaining the object and not buying the object at all. So for this specific bidder, he is indifferent with these two events, winning and paying $100, and event 2, not winning at all. For him, these two are exactly equivalent. So he is not willing to pay 1 penny more for this object. Then we say the valuation is 100. And here we have several types of values. If the value of the bidder is known to himself, not to other bidders, we call it private value case. So the value of this object is my own private information. And second case, common value case. This happens when the worth of the object is unknown to all the bidders. However, this unknown value is equal for all of us. A typical example of common values is the sale of a tract of land with unknown amount of oil underground. So the value of this land is determined by the amount of oil underground. However, before we win this auction, nobody knows exactly how much oil is there. So this value is unknown but has one common value. And common value and private value auctions are two extreme cases. Between these two extremes are interdependent values. In this case, the bidder's valuations can have a common value component and a private value component. The two components will be correlated so that one bidder's valuation can influence the other bidder's valuation. So back to the oil tract example. If it's interdependent value, bidders may acquire different partial information about the value by having access to different geological tests. So they do some experiments on the land. So everyone knows that if they value this land $1 million, the others will have more or less a very similar value for this land. So their bids will depend on these aspects, which will be correlated. However, in the private value case, the bid is only determined by their own valuations. The strategy of a bidder is how much to bid in a specific auction he participates. So let's say for bidder I, his strategy is the bid. Let's call it BI. And BI should be a function of his own valuations and others' valuations. But usually he has no idea the V of J. He doesn't know how much the other bidders will value this object. So he will form an estimate on the others' valuations. A bidder's strategy BI should be a function of his own valuation and the estimate of all others' valuations. In this lecture, we'll cover several types of auctions: open bid and sealed bid. For open bid, we have English ascending auctions and Dutch descending auctions. And for English ascending auction, there are two varieties, basically the same format but with some change. Japanese auction, which is just continuous price version of EAA, and eBay auction is just the online version of EAA. So let's start with the open bid auctions. What is an English ascending auction? So the price starts at a very low level and gradually increases every round. And in every round, a bidder needs to indicate if he wants to stay or he wants to drop out. As price increases, there will be fewer and fewer bidders, so the price will increase until there's only one bidder who still shows interest. Then this bidder will win this item and pays the last price quoted. And once a bidder quits the auction, he is not allowed to come back. And if the price increases continuously, we call it a Japanese auction. So eBay auction is just an online version of this EAA, because you say to yourself how much you're willing to pay for this object, and as long as the price indicated is below your willingness to pay, you remain in the auction, you are still active. As the price is too high for you, you drop out. And price rises until there is only one bidder that is still active. So this is exactly EAA. The next type of open auction is Dutch descending auction. So it's the opposite of EAA. The auction starts at a very high price and continue to drop. It keeps dropping until there is one bidder shows interest at the current price, so he calls out and grabs this item. Then the price will stop dropping. The winner is selected, he wins the item and pays the price. In open bid auctions, everything is open, and there are basically two types. One is that the price keeps rising and the other price keeps dropping. So now let's have a look at the sealed bid auctions. Unlike the open auctions where all the information is open, here you submit your bid in a sealed envelope where nobody else knows what you wrote in the envelope. Then after you submit the bid, the seller will open it simultaneously and he sees the bid submitted. The highest bidder will be selected to win this item and he will pay the number he wrote. And in the second price sealed bid auction is very similar as to the first price, except that the winner pays the second highest bid. Note that the winner is still the one who indicates the highest value, but the price he pays is only the second highest. For example, there are three bidders, SpongeBob, Squidward, and Patrick, bid for one pineapple, and they write their numbers in an envelope. After submitting the bid, the auctioneer will open this envelope and sees the values they indicate. And then among the three bidders, who is the highest? SpongeBob. He indicates $8. So he wins this item, but he only needs to pay the second highest price, which is $5. And there is a nice property in the second price sealed bid auction. It is a dominant strategy for each player to bid his or her true valuation. It's a very nice property because it simplifies your strategy. You know how to play the game in the best way, and this strategy is very easy to implement. Now let's prove why it is a dominant strategy to bid truthfully. Following the previous example, let's assume the valuations are $8, $5, and $3 respectively. So let's see if they have any incentive to lie about this valuation. If they bid truthfully, then 853 would be the bid submitted. Then SpongeBob will be the winner and he pays $5. First, let's check if SpongeBob has any incentive to lie. He has two ways to lie. Either he overbid, like he will write in the envelope $9. Then how will it affect the result? SpongeBob is still the winner. He is the highest value. So he wins the item, the payment is still $5. There's no change. However, if he underbid, let's say instead of $8, he says $7. If so, he's still the highest value. He wins the item, still pays $5, no change. But what if he underbid, but for a very low price, let's say $4? In this case, he is no longer the highest bidder. Patrick Star will win this game. So he doesn't win, and it's a loss for him. Because before, he will pay only $5 for an item that is worth for him $8. He end up with $3 surplus. But now, if he changed to underbid for $4 only, he end up with $0 surplus. It's a loss for him. So for the winner, he has no incentive to lie. He should report truthfully $8 his valuation. Now let's see for the losers if they have any incentive to lie. Maybe they want to overbid, then they have a chance to win. For example, Patrick Star. If he lies and overbid for $6, nothing changed. Because SpongeBob is still the highest bidder, he is the winner still. But if he is very ambitious now, he wants to bid $10, then Patrick Star will be the winner. He values it the most, but what's the price he needs to pay? The second highest price, which is $8 in this case. So he pays $8 for an item which is worth of $5 for him only. So if he lies, he ends up with a negative surplus. It's a loss for him. So Patrick Star has no incentive to overbid. What about underbid? Then he will not affect the result because he's already not the highest bidder. If he lowers it even more, he will no longer be selected to be the winner. So in this case, nothing will change. Now I would like to make a remark about English auction and second price auctions. In the private value case, these two auctions are strategically equivalent. We mentioned this result in the previous slide. Here, equivalence between second price sealed auction and English ascending auction. Now let's see why. It is true that in the English ascending auction, the situation is much more complicated because it is an extensive form rather than a normal form game. So bidders are able to observe some information at each round and decide how they're gonna proceed given this information. Like they can conditional on how many bidders are still remaining, then to decide whether to stay or drop out. However, in the case of private valuation, the revealed information is actually irrelevant. It doesn't make any difference. So we can show that in the private value case, it is a dominant strategy for bidders to bid up to and not beyond their valuations in the English auction. The strategy for bidder is the same as in second price auction. Truth telling is a dominant strategy. So we say second price auction and English auction are strategically equivalent. Now you can use what you learned in this lecture to direct you how to bid on eBay. Remember we mentioned that there are two varieties of English ascending auction. One is Japanese auctions, where the price will change continuously, and the other is the online auction. So how to bid online? It is the dominant strategy to bid truthfully. So before you place your bid on eBay, think very carefully of the maximum price you're willing to pay. That is your valuation. Then put an automatic bid where you raise your bid as much as needed up to your valuation. Then quit the auction if the price exceeds this value. This is an optimal and easy to implement strategy and is not subject to any strategic manipulation. Truthfully revealing your valuation is a weakly dominant strategy for you to bid on eBay because you cannot lose by playing such a strategy. It is the best for any player, irrespective of the other players' strategies. So now you know how to bid on eBay. So in the next lecture, we'll talk about the strategic equivalence between first price bid auction and Dutch descending auction. Then we will learn how to bid in this type of auctions. So I will see you in the next video.